Hello, and welcome to another session in educational psychology. In our module this week, we will be discussing behavioral theory of learning, and we'll be concentrating on operant conditioning. Behaviorism seeks to look at learning from the view of the role of the environment in one's learning. So let us explore two of the major areas in behavioral theory. Classical conditioning, developed by Pavlov, and operant conditioning by Skinner. Classical conditioning deals with learning by association. So we associate the bell on a truck with ice cream. So you're not really necessarily feeling for ice cream, but because you heard that bell ringing, the taste of ice cream comes all over you and you have to get ice cream. We see that happening where students learn to associate certain things with excitement and certain things with fear, and that's to be related to classical conditioning. Operant conditioning looks at the learning that occurs based on the responses that an individual receives after behaving in a particular manner. So the rewards or punishment that an individual receives determines whether or not they want to continue with that behavior. So, from the behavioral theory, learning is viewed as a change in behavior due to the consequences provided by the environment. In this view of learning, the environment has a very critical component in determining what is learned, when it is learned, and how it is learned. So the consequences can be divided into two areas. Rewards would seek to strengthen the behavior, and we call that reinforcement. And if we have negative or adversive stimuli after a particular behavior, it is called punishment. Reinforcement always seeks to strengthen a behavior, whereas punishment always seeks to weaken a behavior. We're seeing that being utilized in everyday circumstances, not just in the classroom. You have a store deciding we should give extra points on Wednesdays because persons hardly ever come shopping in the middle of the week. But if we give extra points, we may be able to get more shoppers in the middle of the week. And persons would actually shop on a Wednesday so that they could get their double points. And that is seeking to reinforce the behavior that you do not wait on the weekend just to get your groceries from that particular store. Punishment we see happening in everyday life as well. Persons would behave in a particular way while driving, and the policeman would notice that they're speeding, they get a ticket. And so, if you are speeding on the highway and recognize, hey, there's a police vehicle up ahead, or you recognize that that spot has a camera, persons tend to slow down in that area because they do not want to receive that $2,000 ticket. So we have different types of reinforcement: positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Remember that we said reinforcement always deals with strengthening a behavior. So though we're seeing the term negative reinforcement, it still relates to strengthening the behavior. The positive and the negative in front of the term simply means whether we're going to add a reward or we're going to remove an adverse stimulus. So the positive reinforcement is what teachers often do when they provide stickers and stars and points to students in order to encourage a particular behavior. Whereas negative reinforcement relates to removing something that the students would not like to do, and as a result, because of that removal, the behavior is being rewarded. We also see that occurring in real life situations as well, where you have your vehicle, and in order to encourage you to wear your seatbelt, there is this annoying noise beep, 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 beep. Once you sit down on the seat, and the annoying noise is removed once you put on the seatbelt. So the adverse stimulus would be the annoying noise. The behavior is strengthened by you seeking to put on the seatbelt in order to get rid of that annoying noise. So that's an example of negative reinforcement. Now, reinforcement serves as a powerful tool in influencing behavior of students, and we could seek to use that in different schedules or schedules of reinforcement, whereas we want to seek to give the reinforcement after every behavior, and that is termed continuous reinforcement. Now, we would use continuous reinforcement when one is learning a new skill in order to get them motivated, in order to get them excited, in order to keep them sharp, right? However, if you continue utilizing continuous reinforcement, it no longer has the same thrill anymore. So persons often would seek to use a fixed or a ratio type of reinforcement schedule. And if we're saying that we're using fixed, we are looking at a schedule that is specific, right? If we are seeking to use variable, then we will be making changes. If we use ratio, we are relating to number. So after 5 times, after 10 times. If we're using interval, we are relating to time, seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks. Therefore, we would note the various definitions that relate to the various reinforcement schedules, and we're noticing here that we can term it as fixed interval. That would be where we're looking at a specific time frame in which we're giving the reinforcement. Or it could be variable interval, and that is where we'll seek to use a random amount of time intervals where we'll seek to give the reinforcement. We have another term called the ratio, where it relates to the number, and that ratio can be fixed. So we'll say after 2 responses, after the second response, one would get the reward. So after every second response, the student would get the reward. Or we could vary it in terms of how they get the response, and we'll call that variable ratio interval. So the important thing to note is fixed relates to a specific, whereas variable relates to random. Then ratio relates to the number of times, whereas interval relates to time as in seconds, minutes, hours, days. This schedule of reinforcement is used for various purposes. If one wants to establish a particular behavior, we tend to use a fixed schedule. If one seeks to want to maintain a particular behavior, one would use a variable interval or variable ratio schedule. And that therefore leads us to the various principles that teachers can therefore use. How would we use this information of reinforcement and punishment within the classroom? And this is used to motivate students, this is used in instruction, and this is used to manage the classroom setting on a whole within the school. So one of the first things we want to address is the principle of shaping. Now, one would seek to look at the range of behaviors required in the classroom and recognize that these behaviors are very complex, what we require of the student. Even something simple as getting into the class, that is a complex behavior. If you have to break this up into the number of steps required for that to occur, this is not a simple task. So one of the means that that can be done in terms of how do we enter the class orderly would be through the principle of shaping. In terms of teaching a particular concept, that also can use shaping. And in shaping, we are simply seeking to teach a new skill or behavior by means of reinforcing the small steps that will bring us to the required goal. And we can use the token economy and we can use contingency contracts within this shaping activity. So what are the various steps that we can use in shaping? One would need to know what the student already can do because that's now the baseline data. Then we think of the potential reinforcers. What are things that the students are into? What is it that they like? And because you would think that something is a reinforcer or can be used as a reward, whereas the student may not necessarily like that thing. Then we would decide how would we break up this complex task into smaller steps and teach step one and give the reinforcement. Teach step two, then give the reinforcement. And then combine, only give the reinforcement after step one and two is completed. Then we go on now to reinforce the target behavior on a variable reinforcement schedule, either a variable ratio or variable interval. The other principle now that can be the same, this principle of shaping can also be utilized within direct instruction. And this is a teaching strategy which seeks to lead the teacher uses for teacher-led instruction. So the steps are orientation, presentation, structured practice, guided practice, independent practice. Let's take it one at a time. In the orientation stage or phase, the teacher will seek to motivate the student, let them know why we are seeking to master this concept, look at the relevance of this subject area to their life, and get them excited about it. Think of a movie. What do they do at the introduction of the movie? That is what that orientation part of the lesson relates to. Then the teacher would go into presenting the concept. One would need to recognize what is the specific skills required for the students and then work now on breaking that skill up into its component parts and presenting it clearly to the student. And that now is followed by various levels of practice. In structured practice, much more support is given. We possibly do that on a whole. In guided practice, we possibly do that in groups. And then during independent practice, the person would say on their own. You only move to independent practice after the student has mastered 85% of the work. Then we can use token economy as another means of shaping, and we can also use contingency contracts. The